Today, inshallah ta'ala, we continue with the seerah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and we had last week, and we're going to move on to the Battle of Khaybar. And I pointed this out a few times already, and I'll kind of just do it again, that if you study seerah from different sources, you may find the sequence that I shared with you in these sessions to be a little bit different depending on the book that you look at. Some scholars see the sequence to be Khaybar, followed by Umrat al-Qada, followed by Ghazwat Mu'tah. So they see it the opposite, that Khaybar happened before Mu'tah. And some scholars see that they happened almost simultaneously, and some say that they happened the way that I've explained it. We don't know for sure, so it's okay if you end up remembering or memorizing the seerah in a little bit of a different way. It's fine, because there's difference of opinion on this issue amongst scholars. I've come accustomed to telling it this way, so I continue to do that, but I could easily fathom telling it a little bit differently. That would be fine as well. What we know, the reason what's more important is like why is this an issue? Why is the Khaybar even a battle to begin with? It wasn't a huge battle, so the word battle is a little bit of an exaggeration of what actually occurred, but it was an event that needed to be documented, and I need to explain it to you. From year 4 of Hijrah to year 7 of Hijrah, so after, so around just before the battle of Khandaq, of the trench, so after Uhud, basically, until the year 7 when the battle of Khaybar actually occurred, Khaybar served as a source of conspiracy and a source of animosity towards the Muslim country. They put in not only a lot of money towards the campaigns that happened against the Muslims in Badr, Uhud, and later on heavily in Al-Khandaq. So the Battle of the Trench, Al-Ahzab, was heavily funded by Khaybar and the people in Khaybar. But they also served as a source of propaganda against the Prophet ﷺ, against the Muslims. And it got worse when some of the tribes that were in Medina were removed, like Banu Nadir and Banu Qurayza and Banu Qaynuqa, when they were removed from Medina, and the stories I told you previously, due to either acts of treason or attempts on the life of the Prophet ﷺ and trying to assassinate him, they were removed from Medina. Many of them would go to Khaybar. That's where they would go, and it's 150 kilometers north of Medina. I'm going to share with you some pictures so you understand. It's a very rich land. Like when you talk about Saudi Arabia, you talk about Arabia, you're talking about a land that the majority of it is desert. At least where Mecca is. Mecca is situated right in the middle of mountains, and it's a lot of desert surrounding it. And Medina is similar. But not all of Arabia is like that, actually. There's a lot of valleys in Arabia, valleys that are filled with springs and rivers and green and animals and a lot of wildlife. And there are a lot of cities. If you go to Ta'if today, still if you go today to Ta'if, you'll find there's a lot of green there. It doesn't fit the typical vision that we have or understanding of Arabian deserts. But the Mecca was kind of situated in the middle of that desert, and most Arab were very accustomed to the desert and the climate that the desert brings. Khaybar was extremely wealthy. Khaybar was a very, very wealthy area. Wealthy not just in currency, in gold and silver, but also in green. It had a lot of dates and a lot of crops were grown there. In addition to that, it was well protected. There were eight castles that had high walls that surrounded them. Some of them were layered, meaning a castle had surrounding walls. Within those walls, if you get the castle, there's another set of walls with a castle inside. So sometimes a castle had its own walls, and the walls of the castle that's outside of it, and the walls of the castle that's outside of it to protect it. But altogether, there's 8 of them within that area, known to be almost impossible to penetrate historically, meaning they had never actually fallen due to siege or war. None of these castles had fallen. There were a lot of warriors in there. Khaybar had around somewhere between 7,000 to 10,000 people who could bear arms within it. They were self-sufficient for the most part, meaning if you performed a siege around them, preventing them from trade, they could survive for over a year without requiring any trade. And most armies don't have the capacity to situate themselves in siege for a year. The soldiers will die of starvation. It's impossible. So it was hard to imagine that they could ever penetrate these walls. the real problem for the Prophet ﷺ with them was their connections with the Romans and the Persians. They were well connected with the two empires that surrounded the Muslims. The Muslim Ummah, the Prophet ﷺ had a long-term vision for this Ummah. Even though he was just living in Yathrib or Medina at the time, however, he saw the future of what this was going to become. And the threats that existed for the Muslim Ummah were the neighbors to the northeast and the northwest. The northwest, where the Roman Empire ruled all of Isham, or most of Isham and Eastern Europe, and the Persians that ruled eastern part of Mesopotamia, Iraq today, and Iran, and what today is the Stan countries. So the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire, basically they shut off the Muslim Ummah from accessing the world, because you're in a sub-peninsula, right? Arabia is all water. On its east, it's water. And the Gulf, on its left, to the west is the Red Sea, and to the south is the ocean. So really, they don't have access to land if they don't go north, and north was cut off by the Romans and the Persians. So it was a long-term problem for the Muslims. It was a long-term problem. The Prophet ﷺ's problem with Khaybar is that they are funding the annihilation of the Muslim Ummah. They're spreading propaganda, but most importantly, and the reason that he moved towards them, because he hadn't moved year 4, 5, 6, nothing. They were conspiring, they were paying people they were actually, the number of times that they paid Murtaziqah, which are mercenaries, to perform or to put together a small army to try and raid Medina are so many that I don't count them for you in Seerah. I don't go through each one of them. He had to neutralize all of these threats, alayhi salatu wasalam, funded by Khaybar, because the people would admit where they got the money from. He didn't go after them, alayhi salatu wasalam, because he didn't want another war opening. He didn't have another war front. The reason that in year 7 he finally moved towards Khaybar is because they started to communicate with the Persians and the Romans with a plan of bringing an army to destroy Medina. Like they started going out to them saying, there's a real threat now here. For the longest time, Arabia was not a problem for you guys, but now there's a threat. This man and his people, they are causing chaos. That you need to neutralize him. So he started reaching out to the Romans and the Persians, looking for support, military support, to come after the Prophet. That's a problem. That's going to be a problem, because now we're bringing. Now it's going to turn into a world war. Now he's bringing in foreign troops to try and. So and how do you know that? Because the Prophet, if you remember a few weeks ago, when we talked about the correspondence he had with kings, he was corresponding with kings. He had open communication with the leaders of the land. So he knew, alayhi salatu wasalam, when certain leaders were talking to other leaders about things. Meaning he was cued in to those lines of communication. So he knew that Khaybar was in communication with the Romans, in communication with the Persians, with the intention. Because after the Battle of the Trench, after the Ahzab, after the Confederates, Khaybar, and Huyay ibn Akhtab, and Kinana ibn Abi al-Huqayq, and Salam ibn Abi al-Huqayq, and all of those leaders, when the Battle of the Trench failed, after they had paid Ghatafan and he helped Quraysh put together all of the Arabs to go and annihilate Medina, they started looking for foreign forces to do this. Like they lost hope of the Arabs doing it, so they started looking elsewhere. Once they started doing that, the Prophet ﷺ had to move. He moved immediately, alayhi salatu wasalam. It was actually quite. It was quite shocking to the Sahaba, because they knew what Khaybar was doing for the last 3 to 4 years, right? And the Prophet ﷺ had just signed a peace treaty with Mecca, with Quraysh, and this was bringing in so many new Muslims. And they had just finished, or within this time frame, they had to go after for Mu'tah to defend the brother who was murdered by Al-Ghassasina or Manadhira. So he had to go up and fight the Romans. So it wasn't the timing seemed very odd to the Muslims. In terms of understanding why the Prophet ﷺ would choose this time specifically to go after Khaybar, it didn't make sense to them. You put in so much effort, Ya Rasulullah, to come up with a peace treaty with Quraysh. We just finished, and he's fighting all these other fronts. Why are we going after Khaybar? The reason for him, alayhi salatu wasalam, is now they became a different type of threat. Now they were seeking foreign troops to come into the land. His goal, alayhi salatu wasalam, was to go and perform a siege. A siege is when an army sits around a castle and stays there long enough and forces them to surrender. His goal was to come up with a peace treaty with them. Like come up with a sulh, some degree, some way of leveling the battle, the battlefield here with them. And that's why he went. He went with 1,400 people, alayhi salatu wasalam. 10,000 warriors on the other side, with 40,000 trees, or 8 castles in total. He leaves with 1,400 people, alayhi salatu. It's a very small number in comparison. Like I said, all of the conquests that he went on, alayhi salatu, aside from Makkah, that I'm going to talk to you about, inshallah, in a few weeks, or aside from that, the numbers were very small. The largest of them was Mu'tah, when he wasn't there, alayhi salatu. He sent, that was absolutely all of the Muslim men and women who could bear arms were on that battle. But when he went to Khaybar, he only took half of that number, so 1,400 men, which is actually quite small. It's 150 kilometers north. On the other side are these leaders, Huyay bin Akhtab and Ka'b bin Ashraf. These men who had left Medina previously. They were bitter about the fact that they had to leave Medina after betraying the Prophet ﷺ and trying to murder him, and also at the same time performing treasons during war time, like Banu Qurayza. They were bitter that they had to leave. So they were working relentlessly to try and come up with a plan to raid Medina again. The Prophet ﷺ, before anything came to fruition, they found him at their doorsteps. He had brought his army, ﷺ, and performed a siege right in front of these castles. And I shared with you a few. So these are castles that still stand today, by the way. Like if you were to go to Saudi and you want to visit, you can see that they can take you and you can see some of the remnants of the qila' of Khaybar. And these are some pictures from a few of them. This is probably the most impressive of them all. And you can see these are large. These are big castles, and you can imagine that maybe kilometers away from the castle were high walls, and these walls were well protected by soldiers and their military. So it was hard, and you can see there's a lot of green, a lot of palm trees and sources of. So they were kind of well off. Another few pictures of kind of what these castles look like today if you were to go and visit. I actually went to one of them when I was a kid and saw them. It's quite impressive. His goal was to force their hand to a treaty, alayhi salatu wasalam, as he did with Quraysh in Hudaybiyah. When he forced their hands to sign a treaty, he wanted to force the hands of the people of Khaybar to sign a treaty. And the reason we know that it was not his intention was not war, is that altogether only 96 people died. Like this whole thing, this whole conquest of Khaybar, from both sides, like from the Muslim side and from the enemy side, 96 altogether. So less than 100 people actually fell. The goal was not for there to be a bloodbath, but really to force the hand of the enemy to kind of make a difference. So to tell you the story of what happened, the Prophet ﷺ makes his announcement that we're going on a conquest. He would never tell people where he was going, ﷺ. He always he chose a different direction than the one he was actually going in. So if he was going north, he would act like he's going east, or if he's going west, he'd act like he's going south. Like he'd always pretend that he's going in that direction, so that if there are any spies, they give false information back that he's headed to the west. He's going somewhere there, and then he starts moving with his army west, and then he turns around and he goes in the direction he wants to go. There's only once or twice that he pointed out exactly where he was going, and one of them was Mu'tah. Mu'tah, he told everyone, "This is where we're going. We're going to the north for the Romans." There was no muwara in that one. But Khaybar, as all of his battles, alayhi salatu wasalam, he never actually gave out the direction he was going in. So he would head west first and then go northeast towards where Khaybar was. On the way there, this is a story that I love to tell. It's the story of this young girl. So on their way there, they find maybe a 10-year-old girl with the army. Her name is Khadija, by the way. And I always thought that I know that this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam as a way to reminisce a little bit for a moment, because that name, it means a lot to him alayhi salatu wasalam in his life, and she had passed away at that point, maybe 10 years ago. It was a decade prior to that moment that his beloved had passed away. And they found this young girl, and they asked her, like, who are you with? I'm not. Where's your mom? She's not with you. Where's your dad? No one. Why did you come here? He said, I wanted to go with Rasulullah alayhi salatu. He's going towards the Bayt. I don't want to go with him. But they didn't, and they're already 100 kilometers into this battle. They can't send her back. So the ladies who bring her over to the Prophet alayhi salatu say, Rasulullah, you have to hear this. It's hilarious, but at the same time, it's an issue of concern. So what to do? So they come to the Prophet ﷺ, هذه خرجت يعني لا والد ولا والدة. She has come out, she has left with us in the army, and somehow no one noticed, and she has no father nor mother with her. Like she has no relatives, she's alone. فقال عليه الصلاة والسلام ما أخرجك? Why are you here? فقالت خرجت معك يا رسول الله. I left with you. You went for jihad and I left with you. فقال فأردفها خلفه عليه الصلاة والسلام. So he had her sit behind him on his horse عليه الصلاة والسلام the whole trip. تقول فكان إذا نزل أنزلني وإذا طعم أطعمني وإذا سقي سقاني. If it was time to rest, he would prepare a place for me to sleep and rest. It was time for food, he would bring the food to feed me. If it was time to drink, he'd bring the drink to drink me, to pinch my thirst. And she stayed. فبقيت معه عليه الصلاة والسلام طيلة الرحلة. I stayed with him the whole time, and this was over around 20 days or more, maybe up to a month. The conquest, any conquest takes a long time because it takes maybe 4 or 5 days to get to your destination, and then maybe more than that to get back, depending on how far away it is. 150 kilometers. Imagine going 150 kilometers on camels or horses. This is not it's not going to happen in a few hours as we today with cars. So this is a week to get somewhere or with an army, and a week to get back. And then of course the conquest itself is around 20 days or so. So she's out of her, but they have nothing. He can't send people back out of his system. He needs the people he has. He cannot afford to send 3 or 4 people to take her home and then lose someone who's come with him with a specific goal. تقول حتى انقضت الغزوة, until the battle was had ended. فعدت معهم, and I came back with the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. فعدت إلى أهلي, I go back to my parents who are worried and upset that they didn't know where I was. فعدت إلى أهلي أخذتني أمي وأرادت أن تدخل بي البيت. My mother took me and wants to enter the house. فإذ برسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام ينادي, and the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام is calling from afar. He's calling upon me, يا خديجة, the name is Khadija. فقال جعلنا لك سهما. We have chosen for you, or we have prepared for you a percentage of the loot. Meaning, you went with us, you are deserving of some degree of ujrah. Like everyone who goes on these battles is in deserving of some degree of payment or some percentage of the ghanima that comes from these battles. This is just the norm of going on it. And she had gone with them. رضي الله عنها. So the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام قال لك عندنا سهم. I got you. فقال هذه القلادة, and he had with him عليه الصلاة والسلام a necklace. قال فمددت يدي آخذها. I put my hand out to take it from the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. فقال لا والله أنا ألبسك إياها. No, I'll put it on your neck. So قال فألبسنيها رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. So he put it on my neck. This lady is telling this story in her 60s. فتقول فوالله ما غادرت رقبتي منذ ألبسنيها رسول الله. I have not removed it from my neck from the day he put it on my neck عليه الصلاة والسلام. وإني أوصيت أنها تجعل معي في قبري إذا مت. And I have made the وصية, when I die it has to stay with me. حتى إذا خرجت يوم القيامة ناديت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. The day of judgment I call upon the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. يا رسول الله أنا صاحبة القلال. I'm the one that you gave the necklace for on the day of. رضي الله عنها وأرضاها. And I always thought, and this is just my own observation of the story. You don't find this in the books of Seerah, just my own kind of observation. The Prophet ﷺ at that point, how old is he? This is year 7 of Hijrah. Anyone want to give me a stab? How old is he now? ﷺ? He was 40 when he got his wahi, right? And he was 53 when he left Medina, Mecca. 7 years in, he's around 60, ﷺ, right? 60 is a significant number in the life of the human being. Like it has significance to it. It's when you're kind of now elderly, like you're older. You're no longer, you can't call yourself a young man anymore. Like it's, you want to, but you can't because the number 60 is kind of staring at you, so you're stuck with it. So he was 60 alayhi salatu wasalam. He wasn't young anymore in his mind. And of course, he doesn't know how much time is left. The average or the median life expectancy back then was 38. So he had already lived way beyond that, alayhi salatu wasalam. Most people died in their 60s back then. They still do today, if you're outside of Canada, and places where they have a lot of healthcare. Most people do. So he's thinking, alayhi salatu wasalam, about succession. We talked about this in Mu'tah. He sent them, he didn't go with them on Mu'tah, because he needed to train the Sahaba for succession, to pick up, to carry the baton, to move this forward. We're not going to live forever. We need the young next generation to carry this. You have to have learned. You have to be in the right mindset. You have to have the right skill set so that you can carry this, so that you can move forward with it, so that it's not going to die with us. It has to continue with you. So for him, alayhi salatu wasalam, that's the most important piece, because he's the first one in this story. I'm only a small piece of a huge chain. It doesn't make that much of a difference. There's millions other. But for him, it's only him. He had to make sure succession was going to happen appropriately, alayhi salatu wasalam, in his life. So for him, this was a big part. And then he's thinking about this all the time. That's how I imagined this. And then this 10-year-old girl, out of nowhere, finds herself, decided to go on the ghazwa with the Prophet ﷺ without, and her name happened to be Khadija. Just happened to be the name of the woman who once supported him through all of this. The lady whom he loved the most. The lady who was there with him at the beginning, who supported him through the difficult years. The lady who's not with him anymore, who passed away. As if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing him, there's another one. Yes, that Khadija is gone, but there's another one, you see? Another Khadija is coming along. And they will come along. Generation after generation, they'll come along. As you take care of them, as you educate them, as you continue to support them and nourish them, they will come along. So Khadija, yes, is gone, but here's another one. She's 10. A few years from now, she'll be. You educate her now, she'll become a leader amongst her people later on and continue this deen. And I feel like that was meaningful to him, alayhi salatu wasalam, right? Because the story is interesting. Like he didn't have to. There was no need for him to have the young girl with him. It's like finding a grade 3 or 2 girl. You can just one of the ladies take care of her. Khalas. But no, she was with him, like visibly, publicly, wherever he went, alayhi salatu wasalam. He always holding her hand, making sure he's taking. Why? I think it meant something to him, alayhi salatu wasalam. I think he saw something in this story. And when she told him her name, it kind of clicked in his mind, alayhi salatu wasalam, and it was sentimental. Oh, so this is Khadija? Okay. Yeah, well, Allah yarhamha, she's gone, but no, I understand now. Right? So it was a little bit of I think the way I see it, it was a beautiful message from the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala for him, alayhi salatu wasalam, that doesn't die off with you, or with her, or with anyone else. And if you continue to do the work, the next generation of Muhammads and Khadijas will come along. And they'll carry it. And then if they do their work appropriately, the next generation will come along. And that's how this works. I always found that to be an interesting story to kind of share about his life. Before they left for the battle, an interesting incident happened. A Sahabi by the name of Abdullah ibn Abi Hadrad radiallahu anhu was preparing himself to go on the battle. And a man by the name of Abu Mishham or Abu Shahm, he came by and he said, munafiqeen, and he said, you owe me 5 dirham. I need you to pay it to me now, before you leave. So Abdullah told him, I'll pay it to you when I come back. Inshallah, once Surah Al-Fath had it within it verses that implied that there was going to be a lot of wealth coming the Muslims' way. وَعَدَكُمُ اللَّهُ مَغَانِمَ كَثِيرَةً تَأْخُذُونَها فَعَجَّلَ لَكُمْ هَذِهِ وَكَفَّ أَيْدِيَ النَّاسِ عَنْكُمْ. When you talked about, when Surah Al-Fath talked about Hudaybiyah, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising you a lot of wealth to come your way. So a lot of the Sahaba interpreted that by, of Khaybar, there being bounty and wealth to come to them from Khaybar. So he's telling the man, once I come back, I'll pay you in full. Like I'll pay it all at once. فَقَالَ أَبُو مِشْحَمْ وَتَظُنُّونَ أَنَّكُمْ عَائِدُونَ. And you think you're actually going to come back? You think you're going to come back from this? أَيَظُنُّ صَاحِبُكَ أَنَّهُ يَذْهَبُ إِلَى حُصُونِ خَيْبَرَ وَتَعُودُونَ مِنْهَا أَحْيَاءً. Your sahibuk is, I mean the Prophet ﷺ, your guy think that you guys are going to go to the castles of Khaybar and actually come back alive? قال فإنها مقابركم. You're going to go and get buried right in front of that castle like everyone else who ever went there before. فإني لا آمن على مالي. I don't trust that I'm going to get my wealth, so I need it now. You give it to me now. And this is talked about in Surah Al-Fath as well. So Abdullah ibn Abi Hadrad, he goes to the Prophet ﷺ asking for qada. He's asking for a judicial ruling. He took Abu Mishham with him, or Abu Shahm, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, this man is asking me for the wealth now, and he will not wait until I come back, and he's saying this. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ادفعها له. You have to pay him back now. Like it's haqqu, it's his right. He's entitled to be paid now if he wants to be paid now. If you're already late, if this is the time, then he's entitled. فغم علي. I got very upset because ولم يكن عندي إلا ثوبان ثوب ألبسه وثوب أغير فيه I only had 2 pieces of clothing, one that I wore and the other one that I kept, I cleaned and then I switched them, and it was only 2 pieces of clothing. فبعت واحدة منها بثلاث دراهم أو بثلاثة دراهم. I sold one for 3 dirham. فبقي درهمان, I still owed 2. فبعت عمامتي. The imama is a big deal for the Arab because for today it's more of a religious, it's a religious symbol because he wore it alayhi salatu wasalam, and the scholars after him wore it, so people wear it in mushabaha to him alayhi salatu wasalam. Back in Arabia, you wore a imama because you wanted to survive, you didn't want to die. You needed something to protect you from the rays of the sun and the difficult winds that were going to hit you in the desert. So the imama is basically, it's wearing a taqiyya, but it's taking a piece of cloth and kind of putting it around your head, so that means that there's a little bit more space and there's more layers, so your scalp is safe from the heat and the sun. And then you would use the same piece of cloth and you would cover your face with it, right, and your neck, so that when the sand and the wind is bringing all the sand, hitting your face, it's not causing all the pain. So the imama was an important garment for men in the middle of the desert. So when he sold his imama, and he can't go on this conquest anymore because he only has 1 piece of clothing, 1 piece of clothing, nothing covers his head. قال فجلست حزينا, I sat very upset. فمرت بي عجوز من عجائز المسلمين, and an old lady walked by me when I was sitting there. فقالت ما بك يا صاحب رسول الله. What's wrong with you, O companion of Muhammad عليه الصلاة والسلام? Why are you sitting here? فقلت ليس عندي ما أخرج به مع رسول الله. I don't have with me the provision that allows me to go with the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. I don't have enough. فقالت ما ينقصك, what is it that you're missing? فقلت عباءة وعمامة. فقالت أما العباءة فهذه لك. As far as the cover, I'll give you what I have. And she gave him her عباءة. قالت أما العمامة فدونك هذه فاشتري بها. As for the imama, here's a dirham or something. Go buy something, a piece of cloth to cover your head. فيكون ثوابي معكم إذا خرجتم, and this will be my ajr with you as you leave. I can't leave with you to be a part of this conquest of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, so I'm going to put this wealth as a way for me to get the ajr as you go. فيقول عبد الله فأخذتها فخرجت مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم غنمت من خيبر غنائم كثيرة فكان مما غنمت أسرى لأبي مشحم. After the battle, after we won the battle, I was granted bounty, and amongst the bounty were prisoners of war that I had. One of them was a relative to this man, Abu Shaham, a relative. قال فابتاعه مني فاقتاده مني ب1000 dirham, and he paid me 1,000 dirham to get him out of. I gave him 5. ردها Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala عليه 1,000 for what he did. Subhanallah Rabbil Alameen. When the Prophet ﷺ made it towards Khaybar, and this is something that is narrated in the collection of Imam Ahmad, and it's something he did often ﷺ, or all the time whenever he was going on a battle. Whenever he came, or when he was going on, he was traveling, once he came to a city or a township that he had not been there before, or that he's entering either with the interest of tijara, of trade, or the interest of ghazwa, there's a battle of some sort, he would make this dua. He would say, Allahumma رب السماوات السبع وما أضللن. O Allah, the Lord of the 7 skies and all that which they cover and they offer shade upon. ورب الأراضين السبع وما أقللن. And the Lord of the 7 earths and all that which they carry, all the people that walk around on them and all that life that exists upon them. وَرَبَّ الشَّيَاطِينِ وَمَا أَضْلَلْنَ. And the Lord of all of the demons and all those whom they have misguided. وَرَبَّ الرِّيَاحِ وَمَا ذَرَيْنَ. And the Lord of the winds and all the good and bad that they bring people within this world. فَإِنَّا نَسْأَلُكَ خَيْرَ هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةِ وَخَيْرَ أَهْلِهَا. O Allah, we ask you the goodness of this land and the goodness of the people that live in it. وَنَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنْ شَرِّ هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةِ وَشَرِّ أَهْلِهَا وَشَرِّ مَا فِيهَا. And we seek refuge in you from the evil that exists within this village or this town, and the evil of its people, and the evil that is situated upon it, or that has become it. And this is the sunnah of the dua he would make alayhi salatu. So anytime you're visiting a new place of, you're traveling or visiting somewhere new, this is a dua to memorize from the Prophet alayhi salatu. He would say this every time. He would call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the Lord of the cosmos, and the earth, and the wind, and all that, and the demons, all those that cause evil. And he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the goodness of this place, and to be protected from the evil that exists in this place. And he would say that alayhi salatu because he doesn't want bloodshed. He wanted this to end in a way that was not going to be violent. An interesting thing that occurred on this, on their way there, is a story or the incident of Abu Abs. Abu Abs was a known Sahabi, and the Prophet ﷺ gave a command on the last day of marching towards Khaybar, and he said, "لا يسبق أحد خيولنا." People were moving as a group, and some people were up front and some people were behind. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "I don't want anyone to go ahead of our of the front group of horses." Meaning the front group of horses should be the line. No one go ahead of them. Everyone stay behind them. He gave a military order ﷺ that everyone stays behind. قال فسبق أبو عبس, and Abu Abs, Sahabi, was found. They were doing this all throughout the travel, but that day he made a clear command ﷺ that everyone stay behind this line, no one go ahead. Abu Abs went ahead. So the Prophet ﷺ, he got upset. فناداه فقال يا أبا عبس ألم أقل ألا يسبقنا أحد? Didn't I say no one should go ahead? فقال يا رسول الله ناقتي سريعة سبقت. I have a youthful camel. She's much stronger than all these other camels. What can I do? It's fast. It went. قال فرده رسول الله إلى مؤخرة الجيش يوما لا يكلمه أحد. So he sent him back to the end of the army, and he had him on his fast camel, move alone. No one spoke to him for a full day. No one speaks to him. No one. If he gives Assalamu alaikum, don't answer him for a full day. No one speaks to him. The reason I'm telling you this story is that this happened a few times. If you study the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, you'll find a few examples, especially on conquests or in during times of battle, or where the Prophet ﷺ would issue some form of disciplinary measure for people who didn't follow commands. It's important to understand that about his character ﷺ, because it's easy when you're listening to his stories to sometimes, because of how empathetic and easygoing he was as a person ﷺ. It was easy sometimes to think that he was like that in all of situations, and that being like that in every situation actually works. And that's not the reality or the truth of his life ﷺ. He was very easygoing, he was very empathetic, and he was a very easy person to be around and speak to. But when it came to a structured any form of structured behavior or a structured approach or military, or when there was a hierarchy involved, the Prophet ﷺ was very clear on how people have to behave. He was very, very clear on this. And there are examples of that as well, where say they would come back from a Sariyah, for example, with Amr ibn al-As or Khalid ibn Walid or someone, and they would say, Ya Rasulullah, we were in a position where we were supposed to do this, but then we decided to do that instead, and which one is correct here? Is it doing A or B correct? And he would say, doing B. And then he would say, well, subhanAllah, our leader said we should do A. And he would say, so your leader told you to do A? He would say, yes, then you should have all done A, and he would punish them all. Like you follow, you were on a conquest, and there was a moment where a decision needed to be made, and the leader made the decision, you follow. You don't decide, I'm not going to do this, and go do something else. So they would do that. They would do what they wanted, and then come and talk to the Prophet ﷺ and say, Rasulullah, we had this position, it was A or B, and we chose B, and he's like, yeah, that makes sense, that's a good choice. And then he would say, yeah, well, the leader you sent told us to do A, and then he would say, so he told you, and you didn't listen, and then he would punish them ﷺ. There would be disciplinary measures. It would happen more than once. And the reason being, the Prophet ﷺ, he saw value in the concept of following an emir. He would never allow. He would say عليه الصلاة والسلام ما يخرج ثلاثة إلا ويؤمرون عليهم واحدة. That if three people are to do something together, they have to choose an emir. Emir as a leader. Like they have to choose someone who breaks the tie, or someone who is in charge. They shouldn't just exist as a trio and just kind of make things work. They have to have some form of leadership. Without leadership, you can't get anything done. You can't get anything done. If there's no leadership, nothing gets done. Both people can't drive the car. One of them is actually driving the car, and the other one just has that toy that kids enjoy to just move around, to act like they're important. It's not working. If they're both driving the car, then they're going to have an accident 100 times out of 100. Like 100 times out of 100, you put two steering wheels in a car and let people go, they're going to have accidents. It's impossible. You need some form of leadership. Leadership does not mean dictatorship. It's not synonymous. It doesn't mean that the person who is leading does whatever they want, however they want, whenever they want, and doesn't take feedback. No. But there has to be a structure. There has to be a hierarchy. So when the Prophet ﷺ in a battlefield or in a battle gives a command, you follow. There's no, I didn't feel like it, or I had a quicker camel, or I didn't make sense to me, or I didn't feel like. You just follow. You can come back and argue and talk about things later on, but at moments like these, you have to go with there has to be some degree of leadership. There has to be a structure. If you have a structure and leadership, and you issue a command of some sort of instruction, and people don't follow because they don't feel like it, or don't agree with it, or don't enjoy it, then nothing gets done. If you do that, right, because you don't like your leader, well, what happens when you become a leader and someone under you does the same thing? The hypocrisy that you find from people is absolutely astonishing. Like the hypocrisy from people who don't follow leaders, but then are put in a position of leadership, and then crack down on those who don't follow their commands is absolutely astonishing. And it's sickening, honestly. The concept of leadership in Islam requires two parties. It requires leaders, and it requires those who are willing to be led. You have to have both. An important part of your deen is accepting leadership upon yourself. It's not leadership that is unquestioned. It's not leadership that is uncensored. It's not leadership that has no regulatory methods to hold it accountable. No, but it is leadership. And this will require, at some point throughout your experience, that you follow a command that you don't fully agree with within a structured approach to something. Like it just has to happen that way. There's no other way for things to survive. Wallah, like no companies will survive, no school, nothing does. If there's like a marriage won't, wallah, nothing will. You need this concept to be clear. And right now, we are an ummah of 2 billion with around 1.8 billion leaders and barely 200 million infants who are not leaders just because they don't understand the concept yet, but once they grow up, and they'll be leaders as well. We have 2 billion people who are all khawajas and all shuyukh and all ulama and all political leaders, and they all have opinions, they're all going to do what they want. And so that's why nothing's going to get done. That's why we can't get anything done in any of our communities. It's because our communities are not, like we have not learned the adab of being a part of a community, being a part of a group, where sometimes you are in charge, you are held responsible, like you're responsible of making a decision, which is actually the worst thing in the world, where you have to make the decision, and then you have to be the one person who is accountable for the consequences of that decision. Worst thing ever. Being a part of a structure where you're following commands is not that bad, because you're not responsible for the decision itself. But we don't have either. We don't have people who are actually willing to make decisions and own them, because when you're a leader, you make a decision and then you own it. It's your decision. You're responsible for it. You're accountable for it, right? When people don't like it, the ticket ends with you, people come and ask you about this. That's very important. You can't have, the reason that the world now is filled with committees and boards is because it's a way to dilute the responsibility. So like, who's responsible for this? And then there's no one. No one's responsible for this. No, we don't know. There's no one to be responsible for. There's no one that you can hold accountable, which is why there's like 1 billion lawsuits in every country because there's no one who you're trying to blame someone. But the ticket ends with someone. In any story, someone has to be responsible. And the one responsible has to be obeyed within the capacity of what it is that they're doing. I'm not talking about your boss at work. When they give you an instruction, you follow it. If you don't, you get fired. You get fired. They're going to fire you. They're not going to keep you. Why would they keep you? Your whole job is to follow the instruction of your leader. And then their leader is responsible for the outcomes of what's being done. They're not going to command you in terms of your marriage. They're not going to instruct you in terms of your deen. They're instructing you within the hierarchy of what you're doing. The Prophet ﷺ understood this very well. And he disciplined people who did not respond to it appropriately. He did not put up. like his empathetic side is very well established. There's a million stories of how Rahim and easy go. I just told you a second ago about the little girl. But when it was an issue of, when there was structure, when there was a hierarchy, when there was seriousness, and a command was given and someone decided not to follow, that was no longer. And he became very strict, alayhi salatu wasalam. And it's because of that the Sahaba learned, okay, that when to be easy, when to not to have a problem. Masajid, they're open spaces. People are here. They come back from different backgrounds. They're old and they're young and they speak Arabic and they don't, and they know the Quran, they don't. There's not a place of hierarchy where we have to command people. Yeah. But then there's other spaces where it is, where you absolutely need that. You can't run things. So just remember that a little bit as you kind of study his life, alayhi salatu wasalam. That yes, he's very rahim and very easygoing, but he did understand this piece very well. And he prepared a generation of men and women who understood it as well. So when Abu Bakr got the bay'ah, everyone fell in line. Everyone fell in line. And when Umar was given the bay'ah, everyone fell in line. When Uthman got given the problems of our ummah started when a group decided that they weren't going to fall in line anymore. When the Khawarij decided we don't like Uthman anymore, so we're going to go and try and kill her, kill the Khalifa. When others decided that they were going to start their own thing, build their own country and go out of the. That's when our troubles as Muslims began from that. From those who thought they were too good to be led. They were too good to be a follower. It doesn't mean that you are mindless. Doesn't mean that you don't have an opinion. Doesn't mean that you don't stand for something. But in order for this to work, that has to be the case. Someone has to take the reins. Not everyone. We can't all lead. We can't all drive the car, yaqi. We can't. Some of us have to do something different. That's all right. You may be destined to be up front. You may not. It's fine. Find your space and find your place where you are and do your job well. And a part of that is feeding into the structure of the group. All right. That's the end of my rant on that topic. All right. Ghatafan. So when the Prophet ﷺ moved towards Khaybar, the people of Khaybar were not naive. They knew that at some point it was going to happen because they had increased the heat. Like they were doing a lot of behind the scenes work, and they knew the Prophet ﷺ at some point was going to find out, and that this was going to become a confrontation. So they were prepared for that. So when the Prophet moved with the 1,400 men towards Khaybar, they had paid off the leader of Uyayna bin Hisn, this extremely opportunistic character within the Seerah, this leader of Ghatafan. They had paid him, and they had promised him a certain amount of the thimar of Khaybar, of the dates of Khaybar, if he'll come behind the Prophet ﷺ with his army. Right? Putting the Prophet ﷺ in a position where he has to now turn around and fight, and then Khaybar can open, so they can switch from both sides. So Uyayna starts marching with his 4,000 men behind the Prophet ﷺ. They're 2 days away. So ﷺ would send a negotiator to talk to him. He says, what is it that you want? How many times are we going to do this? You did this in Uhud, and you did this again in Khandaq, and you did. What's your story? And for him, it's money. It's like I was promised all this stuff. So the Prophet ﷺ told him, we'll match it. We'll match it. Go back. What you want? Is it money that you want? We'll match that. We'll give you this amount. And he said no, because what Khaybar was offering was more than the Prophet ﷺ could offer. Like they had more money. He didn't have as much to offer. And he wouldn't listen. The Prophet ﷺ told him, be careful. If you don't take an offer, then all you get is the safe. You'll get the sword, and I don't think you want that piece. But he was arrogant. He didn't listen. So, and I love this story because it shows you a part of the Prophet ﷺ's military that maybe a lot of us don't know. He had an intelligence group, alayhi salatu wasalam. Like he had his mukhabarat, basically, people who knew and knew how to move things and how to spread rumors and talk about. So he had that group, and Zubayr ibn Awwam and Talha were amongst those. So they were working as the negotiations were happening on a plan. The plan was to spread a rumor that another army, the Prophet from Medina, the Prophet had prepared, was sent towards Ghatafan, the actual tribe itself, which is around 70 or 80 kilometers away. Because he had left with 4,000, Ghatafan, the tribe, was empty. There were no warriors in it. So it was a sitting duck for any form of raid. So they spread a rumor that the Prophet ﷺ only left with 1,400 people to Khaybar because he had left 1,000 men in Yathrib that are going to go raid Ghatafan. And they spread it strongly and powerfully enough that Uyayna bin Hisn and his group believed it. And they went back, they retreated back to Ghatafan to protect it. By the time he got back, situated himself for protection, figured out it was a lie, the Battle of Khaybar was over. Like the actual battle itself was done, and there was no. So he got nothing. he didn't get what the people of Khaybar promised him. He didn't take the deal the Prophet ﷺ offered him. He ended up with nothing. But the reason I like this is because sometimes when we look at the Prophet ﷺ's efforts, we often see it as very mechanical and very maybe primary, like very simple, as in just men with swords running around fighting. No planning, nothing in the background, when that's not the case at all. He had ﷺ different divisions within his military. And some of those divisions, their goal, their purpose, their sole purpose was to spread rumors, or to have, they had spies within certain groups that would spread rumors, people who would, sleeping units that they would ask, we need you to say this now. Muslims who hid their Islam and stayed amongst groups, for example, and they would utilize them at certain moments to protect the Muslims, to protect. And when it's war, that's what war is. War is, if you use different tactics to keep yourself safe and to stop bloodshed. And they had a lot of this. The Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims had a lot of these tactics, and that's really why they survived. Like how they survived, because the numbers of the Muslims were very small in comparison to others. Right? So you couldn't argue that it was just the warriors. They were always outnumbered, 1 to 5 and 1 to 6, and sometimes more than that. So it was a lot of the work that these people did in the background, like Talha and Zubayr, they kept, and Sa'id ibn Zayd, and the work that they did in the backgrounds to keep things safe. They arrived right at the castle of Khaybar, the first wall, the first one. And they set camp. Once they set camp there, a man who you only find his name in Seerah twice, once on the day of Badr and yet again, and then again today, Al-Hubab ibn al-Mundhir comes to the Prophet ﷺ again. And he asks him the same question he asked him on the day of Badr. Same question. He said, Ya Rasulullah, أَهَذَا مَنْزِلٌ أَنزَلَكَهُ اللَّهُ? Is this, is our campsite a place Allah, the Divine, told you for us to be here? فقال قال أمنزل تحبه فنفعله لك? Is it a space you love, so we stay here just for you, for your sake, to be happy? فقال لا. قال أهو الحرب والمكر والخديعة? Is it war and all of the cunning and planning of war? فقال هو الحرب والمكر والخديعة. It's war. فقال يا رسول الله هذا ليس بمنزل. This is a bad place to be. It's not right. Again, the same. You find him twice in Seerah. That's all he does. He comes once in Badr and tells the Prophet ﷺ the same thing, then comes again. And this tells you, like when you run a proper ship, like when you run it right, and people are comfortable to speak and people are comfortable to participate, at the right moments, the people who know what they're doing will intervene and help you, like save you from something that you're not necessarily, you haven't necessarily perfected, or it's not your expertise. So this man came and said, Rasulullah, إننا في مرمى سهامهم. You're at a place where we're too close. They can get us with their arrows. Like their arrows can make it this far. وفي مرمى عيونهم, and they can see, they can count us. فإن إن رجعنا إلى الخلف لم يعدونا ولم تصل سهامهم إلينا. If we go back a little bit, you see, come back a little bit, so that they can't, no matter how high up they send the arrow, it can't dome down on us. It'll be too far out, and they can't make out how many of us there are, because that's a big deal. If they figure out how badly we're outnumbered, then they may have other ideas. So we need to get back. فقال عليه الصلاة والسلام نعم الرأي. This is a good, very good idea. ولكن نفعله غدا, but we'll do it tomorrow. حتى لا يظنوا أننا جبنا. I don't want them to think that we're cowardly. I don't want it for us to stay a place and then immediately retreat from it 100 meters back. We're going to stay here today. And then at night, as people are sleeping, we'll pull back. We'll pull back at night when they can't see us. I don't want them to. I don't want the satisfaction of them thinking that we're scared of them somehow to be there. So, and this is important. Again, you see, the Prophet ﷺ, when it comes to the practicality of these conquests, you find him to be extremely pragmatic when he's listening to advice or taking consultation or even offering advice or performing certain behaviors. They would stay in front of these castles for 15 days. The siege would go on for 15 days. People get really, really hungry. The Muslims would get really hungry. The army did not have enough provision. He lived with 1,400 people. Medina itself at the time did not have a lot of provision in it to begin with, so they couldn't take everything. They took a little bit. They could, something. It was not planned for 15 days, so they were getting hungry. They couldn't find enough food, and they were boiling the leaves of trees, and drinking the soup, or taking 1 or 2 dates and sticking with them for days on end on a date or two. It became very difficult. And the reason being that the people on the other side were fine. They had no problem. They had a lot of provision on that side, but the Muslims, they did not. The morale, because of this, after 15 days of this going on, would come down quite a bit. And here's just a picture of one of the castles of Khaybar. Always castles are situated on high mountaintops, so you can see everyone. And then the walls are right at the beginning of the valleys that are around the mountain. So that's where the walls are. So when you're walking, the wall is high and you're going upwards anyway. So it's impossible. Like, it's very hard to do it, because if a wall is on this type of land, like on flat land, then you can figure out ways to go. But when the wall is put on the earth, on an earth that's already slanted upwards, then your disadvantage is worse. You're standing down, and the wall is it's higher than it is just based on the slant of the land. So you can see the walls for these husun were right at the beginning of their valleys, so it would make it very difficult to penetrate them. So 15 days they couldn't do anything. They couldn't do anything at all. They couldn't get through. So the Prophet ﷺ would ask one of the Sahaba by the name of Amir ibn al-Aqwa, and he was an artist in the sense he had a beautiful voice. He had a very beautiful voice. He sounded amazing. So he would say, خُذْ لَنَا مِنْ هَنَّاتِكَ يَا ابْنَ الْأَكْوَعِ. Give us, let us hear something. Give a hanna is a rhythmic sound. When you make a tune just with your voice, like a small tune. But خُذْ لَنَا مِنْ هَنَّاتِكَ is choose a tune, a rhythm, and give us something. So he would go ahead and he would start singing, and he would sing out the words that were said back in early, اللهم لولا أنت ما اهتدينا ولا تصدقنا ولا صلينا فأنزلا سكينة علينا إن البغاة قد عدوا علينا وإن أرادوا فتنة أبينا. And the Prophet ﷺ would say, Abayna, Abayna, he would repeat the last word. And in the Arab, obviously he didn't do it the way I did it. You would sing it out, it would take him hours to sing the whole thing. And the traditional way to do is that when you would give the full verse of poetry, the men would yell out the last word within the verse. And they still do it today. If you go to certain parts of the Arabic world, attend a wedding, for example, and it's in the Zajal or Shi'ar Sha'bi, you'll hear them do that till this day. And he would do this, alayhi salatu wasalam, to raise the morale a bit. People were feeling horrible. There was a lot of 15 days and nothing. Abu Bakr went and tried to penetrate, led, and it didn't work out. Umar went and tried to penetrate and the walls, and it didn't work out. Uthman, no one could get it done. And it was one failed attempt after the other. For 15 days, they could, and they were running out of food, and people were getting tired, and it looked like, and they were getting scared, because any day now, Ghatafan is going to figure out it was all a lie and then come back again, and now have to deal with them again. So there's a lot of worry from that perspective. It was not something that they were looking forward to. So this was a problem. The Prophet ﷺ would end up having, so he would ask Amir to make these, to sing, to bring up the morale. This is not the first time I've told you this in the Seerah. If you've listened to these lessons like since the beginning of them, this is the 4th or 5th time I've shown you that during battles or times of difficulty, they would recline or rely upon some degree of artistic beauty to bring the morale up. The pieces of poetry that Amir would sing were the pieces of poetry that were sung when they were building the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, and later on when they were digging the trench. So these were, for them, historical pieces of poetry, meaning they were coined at a time in their history that was meaningful to them. So Amir chose these verses that all of the people who were there remembered well. All the people who were attending this battle of Khaybar, they knew these words. They reminded them of something. It reminded them of the sacrifices that were put in and the times where they almost lost and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved them and they lived. So it was meaningful to them. And this is what is important in our, the problem with this, the reason I bring this up time and time again is because we have completely dissociated the Muslim community and the Muslim movement within society from art, from any form of artistic growth. And that is very difficult. Like it makes my job like 100-fold more difficult than it needs to be. Because youth are very attracted to art. Art is the expression of the spirit. It's how the spirit expresses itself. It's not a luxury. Art is not a luxury. Art is essential within community growth. Communities do not grow without it. It's impossible. It's not something that you do as an extra thing. And a lot of people think that way, that art is just, no. The arts are what give meaning to life. The arts is how you make sense of loss and make sense of sorrow and make sense of difficulties. It's through artistic expression. It's through proverbs and it's through the words and the writings and the orations of people of wisdom. It's through it's through song and that which moves the soul and moves the heart. These pieces that we tend to look at as inferior, that we tend to think people who do this are they're not that, and the people who enjoy it aren't. No. We give it a secondary, it's not, it's actually extremely important. And I can tell you that in our communities, not only do we not have enough of it, but our youth are discouraged from expressing it. Which is why we have all these doctors and engineers and lawyers and khalas. You have too many of them, I'm good. Every week we meet with one or two shabab in our community to talk about their future, and Sheikh Janab are like, no, let us guess. You want to go into medicine? Subhanallah, I don't know how I must be psychic. It's the same. It's the same thing. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have doctors. I'm a physician myself, so I don't know really what I'm saying here. But the concept is that we have to allow people. Within our society, we need the variety. Like we have to be versatile in the different functions that we have. And the artistic one is, in my opinion, equally important to what we do in terms of teaching. Like when I sit here and I talk about the Prophet ﷺ's life and give you information and try to allow you to inspire yourself by listening to his story, ﷺ, that has to come with a certain dose of art. The Quran itself cannot be read as you read regular text. You are not permitted to do that. We're going to pray Isha in 4 minutes. If the Imam stood up there and said Allahu Akbar and began Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. It's not wrong, but you're not okay with it. I will never let him pray up front again, and that will be the end of his career as an Imam for the rest of his life. And the reason being because what? What did he do wrong? He probably got all the makharij right, he probably got all the ghunnas right, he probably recited the words correctly, but he didn't sing it. Correct or not? He didn't sing it. That's literally what it is. He got all the technical pieces right. He did the ghunna in the right amount. He did the enunciation correctly, did the med correctly, but he didn't sing it. There was no song in his rhythm. He had no tone. So we kick him out. When you go for Ramadan in Taraweeh, what are you looking for? Are you asking, I want the qari who has the most hifz. I want the sheikh who has the most knowledge. Or you're like, I want the guy who sounds the nicest. I don't blame you, because the Quran itself, in all of its beauty, in the divine messaging that exists within it, the divine communication that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inserted within it, all of its grace, had to be communicated artistically. It had to be. Forcing upon us within our ummah, in case we didn't want, in case we weren't going to snap out of it and notice it, forcing upon us a certain degree of artistry, even in the way that we're going to deal with the divine word of the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that has to be interesting to you. That has to click with you a little bit. And then you look at him alayhi salatu wasalam, during Badr, during the building of the masjid, during the digging of the trench. And he had almost on the way to Mecca for Hudaybiyah for Umrah, you find the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam encouraging the poets of saying poetry, encouraging they're called al-hadi. Al-hadi is the man who, I'll say this before we go. Al-hadi was the person who was responsible of pacing the camels. So camels, you don't want them, camels are a bit clunky. They're amazing animals. They're absolutely majestic animals, and you should learn about them because they're very rare. They're unique. Nothing is like them. There's no animal that you eat its meat, drink its milk, use its skin, ride it for work, ride it for war and transportation. There's no, a horse, it takes you places, but you can't eat it or drink its milk. A cow you can drink and eat and you can wear, but you can't take it for war. The camel does everything. But camels are clunky in the way they move. So if they have a lot of them, they can start bumping into each other. So camels are extremely intelligent, and they're very artistic. So the camels need a rhythm. Give them a rhythm, and the camels will start hitting their feet on the ground with that rhythm. So you had a man called the Hadi, and the Hadi would sing it out. He would sing out, يعني طلع he so go up طلع البدر, and then the camels hear the rhythm, and they start moving based on that rhythm, and they stop clunking and slamming into each other. This is not science fiction. Just go back and read this stuff. This is the norm. They're called the Huda. So the Prophet, and every time he went on a battle, of course there was a Hadi. There were sometimes multiple huda, people who would do this, and he would tell them, خُذْ لَنَا مِنْ هَنَّاتِكَ. Let's hear something, give us something, everyone's tired, say something to bring up the morale. He would start saying, Allahumma lawla anta mahtadayna, and they would listen and they would remember and they would feel something and bring back emotion and bring up morale. Well, how do I bring up morale in the community? What have you given me? Nothing. Take kids, teach the kids, with what? With what? What? I have no wiggle room. I have nothing. You want me to, I'm up against popular culture with all of their, all of their movies and songs and garbage. With what? I'm fighting with what? With my little picture there of Husn al-Khaybar and my kursi here telling a story. I have no chance. And our ummah has no chance unless we incorporate the artistic expression